You are pretty off here. It's racism. Democratic populist left policy has been much more popular than Republican conservative policy for decades. The difference is the right is seen as white and anti-minority, and the left is seen as more diverse. Nope, it's not just racism. I know it is so tempting for us to believe that the only reason that Republicans voted for Donald Trump is because they're a bunch of racist bigots, because they're a bunch of stupid, ignorant, racist, sexist bigots. I myself have been guilty of this oversimplification, saying that what happened in 2024 was that America couldn't bring herself to vote for a black woman. Choosing to take up that very oversimplified narrative and failing to understand the very real, conscious reasons that conservatives in this country voted for Donald Trump is doing all of us a grave disservice. We are going to set ourselves up to continue to repeat this pattern until we address the root issues. That does not mean that racism and misogyny were not leveraged by the right in order to gain themselves a victory. But that was not the conscious motivation for most conservative voters. We know that people vote based on their own personal lived experience. If the economy sucks for them, if they feel abandoned, if they feel that they cannot have a good quality of life, that every day is a struggle, they're going to vote for the guy who is not the incumbent. And in particular, in this situation, Donald Trump has spent years pitching himself as a populist, when to us, he's obviously not one. But he said all of the things that conservative voters wanted to hear. And he leveraged the existing racism and misogyny and homophobia and transphobia in the culture. Because after all, who is Donald Trump? A literal billionaire. He is a member of the oligarchy. He is there pitching himself as a faux populist to conservative America while doing the work of the oligarchy. And what is it that the oligarchy needs? To make sure that we never gain class consciousness, that we never have working class solidarity in this country, that we are constantly divided. And they use existing racism and misogyny to keep poor, rural, white America, working class white America, separated from the rest of us, hating the folks who should be their allies. Is classic scapegoating, and the right was very, very good at leveraging it in the last election, in fact, the last couple of elections. All of that is a compounding factor, but the reason that these folks voted for Donald Trump is that he told them he was a populist. He told them he was going to bring back the coal industry. He told them that he was going to make America great for folks in the Rust Belt once again. He told them that he was going to take us back to an era where blue-collar folks in this country could make a good living, buy a house, have a nice pension, retire at 55 on one salary. He told them he was going to restore them to a version of America where they felt prosperous and they felt that they had access to the American dream. And this is where I see folks like you or other creators who are saying that it was simply racism and we just have to accept that a bunch of people in this country are racist and they vote entirely out of their racism and for no other reason. Y'all are missing the mark. Nobody who is struggling to make rent, to feed their families, who sees their bank account shrinking, they have to decide in the winter, do I pay for my heat or do I pay for my groceries? None of those people are thinking, I'm going to vote based on racism. They're thinking about their own economic situation, and they are vulnerable because they are in a precarious situation. They are vulnerable to somebody like Donald Trump, to a grifter, to a con man, to a faux populist like Donald Trump. Because he was really good at speaking directly into their lived experience, directly into their economic hardship and saying, I'm going to rescue you from all of this. He was really good at lying to them and telling them that the problem, it's not the super rich, it's not the oligarchy. No, it's immigrants in this country. The reason that this was a vulnerable demographic, an available demographic that Donald Trump could swoop in and capture is because those folks have been abandoned by the establishment corporate Democrats for decades. I don't want to hear this Democratic populist left policy has been much more popular than Republican conservative policy for decades. That's not true. While the Democratic Party gave lip service to populist progressive policy, it is controlled by corporate elites. It is controlled by Chuck Schumers, by James Carvilles, by Bill and Hillary Clinton. The reason that poor rural white America, who had voted for decades pro-union, pro-Democratic Party, was susceptible, available to be harvested by Donald Trump is because Not because they abandoned the Democratic Party, but because the Democratic Party abandoned them first. Do you not understand? If the Democratic Party had been fulfilling their promises to folks in West Virginia and Kentucky and Missouri, then those folks would not have been available to be picked up by Donald Trump. It is because they had already been abandoned by Clinton-esque establishment Democrats who care about corporate money, dark money, APAC money, who care about their own stock portfolios. Those folks abandoned rural white America, and so rural white America was free for the picking. It wasn't very hard for Donald Trump to pitch his message to them because they have been struggling the same way you and I have been struggling, because the oligarchy has been exploiting all of us, because the wealth disparity has been growing all across this country, not just in liberal cities. I am so sick of folks who live in cities, blue dots in blue cities. Y'all are surrounded by Democrats having your judgy as fuck opinion about folks who live in red rural America. You don't know these people. It's far easier for you to dehumanize them and just be like, they're just racist bigots. Their only motivation is racism, not feeding their children, not affording health care. These are the things that everybody in America cares about. It's far too comforting for far too many Democratic voters to just dehumanize white rural America, to just think there is nothing more that drives these people other than their racism, when we know that people vote based on their economic circumstances. It doesn't feel good to realize that millions of Americans have been abandoned by the Democratic Party, especially knowing that those folks are people who the Democratic Party says they should be serving, folks who struggle in poverty, folks who are union members, folks who loyally gave their vote to the Democratic Party for a long, long time and felt that they saw no return. Yeah, we're on the cusp of working class solidarity in this country. The oligarchy is squeezing the shit out of all of us. And now I think it's becoming very apparent to a lot of folks who were hoodwinked by Trump when he told them that he was a populist, when he told them that he cared about them. It's now apparent to them that oh, wait a minute, an actual billionaire is part of the oligarchy and he has no interest in making America great again for the working class, right? This is an important pivotal moment. And if we choose to oversimplify the reason that these folks voted for Donald Trump, if we choose to ignore their very real suffering, if we choose to dehumanize them and pretend that they are far less complex and that they don't share the same struggles we share, we're not going to pick up this important pivot and run with the ball. Like we're going to set ourselves back tremendously. We've got to understand that these folks have been suffering in late stage capitalism the same way that you and I have. Were racism and misogyny factors? Yes. Was it the main conscious motivator for most Trump voters? No. Did decades of failure to deliver on promises from the Democratic Party, abandonment of rural white America by the Democratic Party, create this vulnerability where Donald Trump had an opening? Yes. James Carville just came out with, octogenarian James Carville just came out with a piece saying that the Democratic establishment needs to jettison AOC and Bernie. They are still determined to be losers. Corporate establishment Democrats are still making the same mistakes. We need working class solidarity. The Democratic Party needs a Tea Party takeover. We need a populist movement within the party. The same reason that anybody is still listening to James Carville, the same reason that Bill Clinton endorsed Andrew Cuomo and that Chuck Schumer refused to endorse Zoran Mamdani, are the reasons that so many white rural Americans were susceptible to the faux populism of Donald Trump. Corporate establishment Democrats are the problem. Systemic racism and misogyny were at play, but that is not what drove these people away from the Democratic Party. If the Democratic Party wants to be a party that wins, if they want to be a party that actually meets the needs of working class Americans, if they want to get the loyalty of the American people, they have to deliver on their promises. They have to be a party that works for the working class, not a party that works for their own stock portfolios and the super rich. Pretending that what happened in 2024 is not inextricably tied to Democratic elites is going to cause us to repeat the same cycles over and over again. Do not oversimplify what happened.